Welcome to Photography Composition. Today we will be looking at the arrangement of your photographs. Our goal here is to take our pictures that we've been taking and make them into photographs. And we will be doing that using the 6 photo composition techniques. The first composition technique we're going to look at is rule of thirds, and it's the one that I use all the time. I want you to imagine a hashtag on your viewfinder or a tic-tac-toe grid. The lines and intersections are the main focal points that you want to use. Try to place important objects on those lines and intersections. In this example, the photographer decided that their focal point was the Ferris wheel. So you have the Ferris wheel on the focal point where the lines intersect, and then the rest of the shoreline kind of tells the story of what's happening. So you get to see a little bit more of the scene. You're almost never going to center an object in your viewfinder unless it's fill the frame, which is another composition technique we'll look at here in a second. If you do fill the frame, then you're going to do rule of third on the object's eyes, like in the example here. The next composition technique is bird's eye. This is where you are on a higher level than your subject or your object. Usually they'll be sitting down, or you could be standing on an object. This is where you might see people climbing on stairs, climbing on rocks, or whatever they can find around. Worm's eye is the opposite of bird's eye. This is where you have your subject or your object up higher or equal to you, and where on bird's eye you have people, your photographer, climbing around. Worm's eye is where you're usually laying down on the ground, or you are at least crouched down to get lower. Next we have leading lines. Leading lines lead to the point of visual interest in your photograph. In this one we have the wall. It's probably a garage wall. They lead to your subject, and it just draws your eye straight towards her. In this leading lines example, the focal point is actually the big cliff and the hills in the distance. So the leading lines on this would be the markings in the road and the actual road itself. So the kind of rolling hills that guides our eyes down the distance to that hill. Framing is pretty much exactly what it sounds. You find something that either is naturally occurring around you, or you can bring an object or a prop and you frame your subject or your object. Here, the pier is framing the sun, and it's actually also leading lines. Here we have the last composition technique that we're going to look at, and that's fill the frame. And what that means is that you are going to fill your viewfinder with the subject or object that you're taking the photograph of. In this example, we have the girl taking up the entire frame of our picture. I've mentioned but haven't specifically covered that one photograph can be more than one composition technique. We've seen this girl earlier as rule of thirds, and then I just mentioned that she is also fill the frame. So one photograph isn't specific to one composition technique. Next, we're going to look at some things that we want to think about as we're taking our pictures. We've already looked at our composition techniques. These are just some kind of tips and things to always keep in mind as we're out taking our pictures. Things that I think about all the time whenever I'm taking pictures as well. You don't always have to be out on a session or out on a photography walk to take pictures. Always have your phone, your iPod, or your camera with you, and be ready so that if you see something that catches your eye, you're ready to take a photograph, and keep those composition techniques in mind when you do. When you're taking pictures, shoot, 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 and shoot some more. The more pictures you take, the more practice you get, the better you're going to get at setting up your pictures and getting good composition for those pictures. It never hurts to take more and just cull out those and delete the ones that are bad. Now this one's kind of iffy. If you're using a phone or an iPod, you never want to zoom. The zoom on those are not good. If you're using a high resolution or a DSLR camera, zooming is fine. But if you're using a point and shoot or a phone, never ever zoom. The same is going to go for flash. Don't use your on-camera flash. It doesn't take good pictures. If you don't have enough light, you just need to readjust your composition. The flash just makes for bad pictures if you use your on-camera flash. You just need to reset. Here are 3 examples. The first one shows you what the picture looks like with direct flash. Then the next one shows natural light. And then the other one shows with indirect flash. You can see how the direct flash is just too harsh of light, and you can see why you want to avoid that. It's pretty clear. When we're out taking pictures, shadows are our happy place. We don't want direct sunlight. If it's cloudy, that's even better. The clouds naturally filter the sunlight, but if it's bright outside, you always want to find shadows. It's the same reason as the flash, it's just too harsh. Here are examples of why being in the sun is bad and why being in the shade is good. You have really harsh shadows on your face whenever you're in the sun. It has really bad spots on the face, and it's just nice and even whenever you're in the shade. For where we are right now, working with composition, our equipment does not matter. It doesn't matter if you're using an iPod, your camera phone, a point-and-shoot camera, or a DSLR. We are worried about how you're setting up your shot, not how many megapixels or what type of equipment you have. When we're out taking our pictures and when you're taking your pictures at home, the biggest thing that I can tell you is please don't just stand there. You should rarely ever stand up. You should always be crouching down, using that worm's eye, using that bird's eye. Please just don't just stand there. Get creative and move around.